The house was quiet, almost too quiet. My parents had left for their anniversary weekend, trusting me to take care of myself while they were away. At 17, I was more than capable of managing a couple of days alone, but as the evening settled in, a slight unease crept over me. I had plans to binge-watch some old horror movies, ironically enough. I ordered pizza and set up a cozy nest in the living room, complete with blankets and snacks. The house, normally bustling with the sounds of my parents' activities, now felt cavernous and empty. I tried to ignore the feeling and focused on the flickering TV screen. The first movie started, its eerie soundtrack filling the room. I was halfway through my second slice of pizza when the phone rang. Startled, I paused the movie and reached for my cell. It was Mom, checking in. "Everything okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice slightly distorted by the poor connection. "Yeah, Mom. Just watching some movies." "Enjoy your trip," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "All right, we'll be back on Sunday. Don't forget to lock the doors before you go to bed." "I will. Love you. Love you too." I hung up and returned to my movie, but the spell had been broken. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shaking my head, I laughed at myself. "You've seen too many horror movies," I muttered, pressing play. As the movie played on, the shadows in the room seemed to grow longer, creeping closer with each passing minute. The characters on screen screamed and ran from unseen terrors, and I found myself glancing nervously at the dark corners of the room. The once comforting darkness of the house now felt oppressive, as if something malevolent lurked just out of sight. The first sign that something was wrong came around midnight. I was deeply engrossed in the climax of the second movie when I heard it, a faint tapping noise, like something lightly striking glass. I paused the movie, my heart thudding in my chest, and listened intently. The tapping continued, rhythmic and persistent. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, directing the beam towards the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but the tapping persisted. I slowly approached the door, trying to calm my racing heart. When I reached the door, I saw the culprit, a tree branch swaying in the wind, occasionally brushing against the glass. I let out a relieved sigh and pushed the branch aside, securing it so it wouldn't make any more noise. As I turned to go back inside, I glanced around the backyard, illuminated by the pale moonlight. Everything seemed peaceful. Back in the living room, I resumed my movie, feeling slightly foolish for being so jumpy. I checked the time, 12:30 a.m. "Only a few more hours," I told myself. "Then it's off to bed." But the unease didn't go away. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, seemed amplified in the silence. I turned the volume of the TV down, straining to hear any other unusual sounds. The minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. The second sign came an hour later. I was starting to drift off, the movie playing softly in the background, when I heard another noise. This time, it was a creaking sound, like a door slowly opening. I sat up, wide awake, and muted the TV. The creaking continued, louder this time. I strained to listen, trying to pinpoint the source. It sounded like it was coming from upstairs. Probably just the house settling, I reassured myself, though my voice trembled slightly. I decided to investigate, grabbing the baseball bat I kept under the couch for situations just like this. Slowly, I made my way up the stairs, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The upstairs hallway was dark, but I knew the layout of the house well enough to navigate it without light. I checked each room, starting with my parents' bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I hesitated before pushing it open. The room was empty, the bed neatly made, just as they had left it. I checked the other rooms, my own bedroom, the guest room, and the bathroom. All were empty and undisturbed. Relieved, I headed back downstairs, but as I reached the bottom step, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The front door, which I was sure I had locked, was slightly open. Panic surged through me. I had definitely locked the front door. I was certain of it. I approached it cautiously, the bat gripped tightly in my hand. I pushed the door closed and locked it again, double-checking the deadbolt this time. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. I must have forgotten to lock it properly, I told myself, though the explanation felt flimsy. I decided to double-check all the locks in the house, just to be safe. The back door, the windows, everything was secured. Feeling slightly better, I returned to the living room. I picked up my phone and texted my parents, just to feel a bit more connected. "Everything's fine here." Just double-checked all the locks. I sat back on the couch, but I couldn't focus on the movie anymore. The feeling of unease was back, stronger than before. I decided to call it a night and head to bed. I turned off the TV and the lights and made my way upstairs, the bat still in hand. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I turned on the bedside lamp and picked up a book, hoping it would distract me. But every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, kept me on edge. I must have dozed off at some point because I was jolted awake by a loud crash from downstairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed the bat and crept out of my room. The house was dark and silent again, but the noise had been real. I made my way downstairs, every shadow seeming to move in the corner of my eye. When I reached the living room, I saw the source of the crash. The picture frame that hung on the wall had fallen, its glass shattered across the floor. I cleaned up the mess, my mind racing with questions. How had the frame fallen? There hadn't been any strong wind or vibrations that could have caused it. As I disposed of the broken glass, I noticed something else. The back door, which I had checked and locked earlier, was slightly ajar. Fear gripped me as I slowly approached the door. I shut it and locked it again, my hands trembling. I checked the rest of the house, but nothing else seemed out of place. I returned to the living room, unsure of what to do next. That's when I saw it, a note, scrawled in what looked like red crayon, lying on the coffee table. My breath caught in my throat as I picked it up. The message was simple but chilling. "I'm watching you." I stared at the note, my mind racing. Who could have left it? How had they gotten inside? I felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. This had to be some kind of sick prank. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. The operator's calm voice was a stark contrast to my frantic explanation. She assured me that a patrol car would be sent to check the area. I thanked her and hung up, my heart still pounding. I double-checked all the locks again and sat down, trying to calm myself. It felt like an eternity before I heard the knock on the door. I cautiously opened it to find 2 police officers standing there. I showed them the note and explained what had happened. They took it seriously, conducting a thorough search of the house and the surrounding area. After finding no signs of forced entry or an intruder, they advised me to stay alert and keep all doors and windows locked. They promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently and gave me their contact information in case anything else happened. I thanked them and watched as they drove away, their presence a temporary comfort. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep, so I decided to stay in the living room with all the lights on. I turned the TV back on, but my mind was too preoccupied to focus on anything. The hours dragged on, and despite my best efforts to stay awake, I eventually drifted off. I woke up with a start, the TV still playing softly in the background. It was early morning, and the first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains. I checked my phone. No new messages. I decided to make some coffee and try to shake off the lingering fear. As I entered the kitchen, I froze. There, on the counter, was another note. This one was written in the same red crayon, but the message was different. "You can't hide from me." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Whoever was doing this had been inside the house while I slept. I grabbed the bat and searched the house again, but there were no signs of an intruder. I called the police, my voice trembling, and they assured me they would send someone over. The officers arrived quickly and conducted another search. They found no signs of forced entry or any clues as to who might be leaving the notes. They suggested I stay with a friend or family member until my parents returned. I reluctantly agreed, realizing I couldn't stay in the house alone any longer. I packed a bag and called my friend Sarah, explaining the situation. She was more than happy to let me stay with her for a few days. As I left the house, I felt a mix of relief and fear. I was glad to be leaving, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was tormenting me would find a way to follow. At Sarah's house, I felt a bit more secure. We spent the day talking and trying to distract me from the fear. She suggested we have a movie night to take my mind off things, and I agreed, hoping it would help. As night fell, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I checked my phone constantly, half expecting another ominous message. But the night passed without incident, and I began to relax. Maybe it was just a prank after all, and the person had given up. The weekend flew by, and soon it was time for me to return home. My parents would be back later that evening, and I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Sarah offered to come with me, but I assured her I would be fine. I wanted to face whatever was happening head-on. When I arrived home, the house seemed normal. There were no new notes or signs of an intruder. I went about my usual routine, trying to shake off the lingering fear. My parents returned as scheduled, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I hugged them tightly, grateful to have them back. I didn't tell them everything that had happened, just enough to explain the extra locks and my stay at Sarah's. They were concerned but trusted me to handle it. Life slowly returned to normal. The shadowy figure and the eerie notes became distant memories, replaced by the everyday concerns of school and family. The extra security measures remained in place, a constant reminder of the ordeal, but they also brought a sense of peace. I never did find out who had been stalking me or why. The police continued to investigate, but the trail went cold. Whoever it was had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. In the end, I learned to live with uncertainty. The experience had changed me, making me more cautious but also more resilient. I knew I could face whatever came my way, no matter how frightening. Months went by, and I started to feel secure again. The house was my sanctuary, and the fear that had once gripped me had faded into the background. I had almost convinced myself that the entire ordeal had been a bizarre, one-time event. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a noise that sent chills down my spine. It was the faint rustling and tapping sounds that I had heard months ago. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen. The noise was coming from outside my window. I grabbed the bat from under my bed and cautiously approached the window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw nothing but darkness. The tapping continued, louder and more insistent. I took a deep breath and yanked the curtains open. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a figure standing just beyond the edge of the porch light. It was a man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. He was tapping on the window with what looked like a piece of metal. Panic surged through me. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking. I needed to call the police, but I didn't want to take my eyes off the intruder. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation to the operator. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. The man continued to tap on the window, his movements slow and deliberate. I could see his eyes now, glinting in the dim light, and they were filled with a cold, malevolent intent. When the flashing lights of the police car finally appeared, the man disappeared into the darkness. The officers arrived and conducted another thorough search of the property, but they found no sign of the intruder. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The police advised me to stay alert and keep all doors and windows locked. They promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently and gave me their contact information in case anything else happened. The next few days were a blur of fear and anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, watching and waiting. I installed more security cameras around the house, and even considered getting a guard dog. My parents were worried, but they tried to support me as best they could. One evening, as I was reviewing the footage from the security cameras, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on the edge of the property, was a shadowy figure. He was barely visible in the dim light, but I recognized him immediately. It was the same man who had been tapping on my window. I called the police again, my hands shaking as I described what I had seen. They arrived quickly and conducted another search, but once again the man had vanished. I felt a mix of frustration and fear. Whoever this man was, he was clever and determined. I couldn't let him continue to terrorize me. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I began to set traps around the property, hoping to catch him in the act. I rigged up a system of tripwires and noisemakers, anything that might alert me to his presence. Days turned into weeks, and there were no more sightings of the man. I started to feel a glimmer of hope that he had given up. But deep down, I knew he was still out there, waiting for the right moment. One night, as I was preparing for bed, I heard the now familiar tapping sound. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed the bat and crept towards the window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw him. The man was back, standing just beyond the edge of the porch light, tapping on the window with that same piece of metal. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. This time, I wouldn't let him get away. I turned on all the lights in the house and made as much noise as I could, hoping to scare him off. The man didn't flinch. He continued to tap on the window, his eyes locked onto mine. I could see the cold, malevolent intent in his gaze, and it sent chills down my spine. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation to the operator. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. The man continued to tap on the window, his movements slow and deliberate. When the flashing lights of the police car finally appeared, the man disappeared into the darkness. The officers arrived and conducted another thorough search of the property, but they found no sign of the intruder. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The police advised me to stay alert and keep all doors and windows locked. They promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently and gave me their contact information in case anything else happened. The next few days were a blur of fear and anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, watching and waiting. I installed more security cameras around the house and even considered getting a guard dog. My parents were worried, but they tried to support me as best they could. One evening, as I was reviewing the footage from the security cameras, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on the edge of the property, was a shadowy figure. He was barely visible in the dim light, but I recognized him immediately. It was the same man who had been tapping on my window. I called the police again, my hands shaking as I described what I had seen. They arrived quickly and conducted another search, but once again the man had vanished. I felt a mix of frustration and fear. Whoever this man was, he was clever and determined. I couldn't let him continue to terrorize me. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I began to set traps around the property, hoping to catch him in the act. I rigged up a system of tripwires and noisemakers, anything that might alert me to his presence. Days turned into weeks, and there were no more sightings of the man. I started to feel a glimmer of hope that he had given up. But deep down, I knew he was still out there, waiting for the right moment. One night, as I was preparing for bed, I heard the now familiar tapping sound. My heart pounded in my chest as I grabbed the bat and crept towards the window. Peeking through the curtains, I saw him. The man was back, standing just beyond the edge of the porch light, tapping on the window with that same piece of metal. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. This time, I wouldn't let him get away. I turned on all the lights in the house and made as much noise as I could, hoping to scare him off. The man didn't flinch. He continued to tap on the window, his eyes locked onto mine. I could see the cold, malevolent intent in his gaze, and it sent chills down my spine. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation to the operator. The minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. The man continued to tap on the window, his movements slow and deliberate. When the flashing lights of the police car finally appeared, the man disappeared into the darkness. The officers arrived and conducted another thorough search of the property, but they found no sign of the intruder. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The police advised me to stay alert and keep all doors and windows locked. They promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently and gave me their contact information in case anything else happened. The next few days were a blur of fear and anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, watching and waiting. I decided it was time to take more substantial measures. I asked my parents to help me set up a comprehensive security system. We made a call to SimpliSafe and had a team come out to install sensors and cameras all around the house. Every door and window was equipped with motion detectors, and we placed cameras in strategic locations to cover every angle of the property. I even set up sensors along the perimeter of the yard, ensuring that no one could approach without being detected. The SimpliSafe system also had a direct connection to the local police, so any breach would trigger an immediate response. With the new security measures in place, I started to feel a bit more at ease. The presence of the sensors and cameras was a constant reminder that I was protected. My parents were relieved too, knowing that we had done everything possible to ensure my safety. One evening, as I was reviewing the footage from the security cameras, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on the edge of the property, was a shadowy figure. He was barely visible in the dim light, but I recognized him immediately. It was the same man who had been tapping on my window. I called the police again, my hands shaking as I described what I had seen. They arrived quickly and conducted another search, but once again the man had vanished. I felt a mix of frustration and fear. Whoever this man was, he was clever and determined. I couldn't let him continue to terrorize me. The new security system gave me some peace of mind, but I knew I had to stay vigilant. Days turned into weeks, and there were no more sightings of the man. I started to feel a glimmer of hope that he had given up, but deep down, I knew he was still out there, waiting for the right moment. I had eagerly anticipated a serene evening alone at Lisa's house. Her family had taken off for a weekend getaway, and I was left to house-sit. The house itself, with its cozy, familiar corners and inviting warmth, seemed like the perfect escape from the hectic pace of everyday life. It was a respite I desperately needed after a long week of classes, extracurriculars, and a never-ending to-do list. The living room, with its soft, amber light filtering through the lampshade, was a sanctuary. I curled up in a plush armchair, wrapped in a thick, hand-knitted blanket that felt like a comforting embrace. My book, a long-awaited escape into another world, lay open in my lap. The soft glow of the lamp provided a cocoon of comfort, and the house seemed to be settling into the same quiet rhythm. But that tranquility was short-lived. As the night wore on, the outside world seemed to intrude with increasing intensity. The wind, once a gentle whisper, began to howl with ferocity. It was as if the storm had a vendetta against the house. The windows rattled violently, and the house groaned and creaked in protest. The shadows cast by the flickering light took on a life of their own, dancing on the walls and floor in disturbing, almost malevolent patterns. A shiver of unease crept up my spine. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to the wind's aggression. Yet, the atmosphere inside the house had changed. The calm I had felt earlier was replaced by an unsettling sense of isolation. I knew I had to check on the security of the house to ease my growing anxiety. I got up and moved through the rooms. The soft thud of my footsteps on the wooden floor seemed overly loud in the oppressive silence. I checked every door and window meticulously, making sure they were all locked tight. The house seemed eerily still, save for the relentless howling of the wind outside. The front door was secured, and the windows, though rattling, were firmly shut. I turned off the lights, hoping to create a more serene environment, and returned to my book, attempting to refocus my attention. The wind continued its assault, and the house seemed to groan and settle with each gust. The unsettling noises, the creaks of the old wooden floorboards, the groaning of the house settling, and the wind rattling the windows, merged into a disconcerting symphony. Each noise seemed exaggerated in the darkness, heightening my sense of unease. My nerves were on edge, and I struggled to concentrate on my book. A sudden, sharp scraping sound against the wall made me jump. My heart raced, and I scanned the room, searching for the source of the noise. The shadows on the walls appeared to shift and writhe, creating an atmosphere of menace. My earlier calm was replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. Determined to quell my growing anxiety, I grabbed a flashlight and began a methodical search of the house. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing the familiar furniture and decorations now rendered strange and unsettling by the shifting shadows. I checked every dark corner and shadowed nook, the beam of the flashlight moving with jittery precision. The house seemed to creak and groan in response to my movements, each sound magnified in the oppressive quiet. The basement door, slightly ajar, seemed to beckon with a dark, foreboding presence. My heart pounded as I glanced at it. The thought of descending into the basement made me shiver, but the noises, the rustling and scraping, seemed to emanate from that direction. I hesitated, torn between curiosity and fear. But I knew I had to investigate. I approached the basement stairs with trepidation. The narrow, spiraling staircase seemed to stretch into an abyss of darkness. Each step I took echoed ominously, the air growing colder and heavier with each descent. The flashlight beam cut narrow, eerie shadows on the walls, revealing a cluttered, disorganized space filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and cobwebs. The rustling noise was now more pronounced, coming from a shadowy corner cluttered with old, musty furniture. My heart raced as I moved cautiously toward the source of the noise. The flashlight beam revealed old boxes, broken furniture, and layers of dust, but nothing seemed out of place. The noise had stopped abruptly, replaced by an unsettling silence that pressed in on me. I began to turn to leave when a loud crash echoed through the basement, making me jump. The flashlight flickered erratically, and I saw a shadowy figure dart across the room. My pulse quickened in panic, and I rushed back up the stairs, clutching the flashlight and a piece of wood I had grabbed for protection. The house seemed to close in around me, every creak and groan amplified in the darkness. Back in the living room, I tried to calm my racing heart. I swept the flashlight's beam across the room, revealing nothing out of place. I paced restlessly, every small noise making me jump. The shadows seemed to close in around me, and the oppressive atmosphere of the house weighed heavily on my nerves. I dialed 911, my hands trembling as I spoke to the operator. "Hello, there's someone in the house," I said, my voice quivering. "I think they're trying to break in." The operator's voice was calm and soothing. "Can you tell me your address and describe what's happening?" "I'm at 123 Maple Street," I said quickly. "I heard noises and saw someone in the basement. I'm alone here, and I'm really scared." "Help is on the way," the operator assured me. "In the meantime, stay on the line with me. Can you tell me more about what you saw?" I described the shadowy figure and the unsettling noises I had heard. My fear was palpable in every word. The noises seemed to come from the basement. I saw a figure moving down there, and I'm not sure if they're still there. The wind outside is making everything worse, and I'm on edge. The operator continued to reassure me, encouraging me to stay calm and keep the line open. I continued to check the doors and windows, the flashlight casting jittery beams across the walls. The wait felt interminable. The wind howled louder outside, and the house groaned with each gust. Every small noise seemed to jump out at me, making me flinch with every creak and rustle. The basement door creaked open slightly, and my blood ran cold as I saw a shadowy figure moving in the darkness below. The rustling and scraping noises resumed, now accompanied by ominous footsteps. My heart pounded, each beat echoing in my ears as I gripped the flashlight and piece of wood, trying to steady my trembling hands. I crept toward the basement door, the flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The figure at the bottom of the stairs was now more distinct, a tall, menacing figure with an angry glare. His eyes gleamed with malevolent intent, and I could see the glint of a knife in his hand. Fear surged through me as he stepped into the beam of the flashlight. Desperately, I swung the flashlight and the piece of wood, trying to defend myself. The intruder was fast, and the knife slashed through the air, cutting into my arm with a searing pain. I staggered back, my vision blurring as I struggled to maintain my footing. The intruder advanced, his movements fluid and menacing. The knife glinted in the dim light as he lunged at me again. I swung the wood with every ounce of strength I had left, but each swing seemed to miss its mark. The intruder struck me with the hilt of the knife, sending me crashing to the floor. The pain was unbearable as the knife sliced into my abdomen, the wound throbbing and searing. I cried out, but my voice was barely more than a whisper. My strength was draining rapidly, and I could barely move. The intruder continued his assault with brutal efficiency, landing blows and kicks that left me reeling. I tried to fight back, swinging the piece of wood with all the strength I could muster, but my efforts were weak and ineffective against his ferocity. He struck me repeatedly, each hit pushing me closer to the brink of consciousness. The cold, hard floor beneath me felt increasingly distant, as if I was sinking into a void. The world around me grew darker and more distant with each passing moment. The pain was intense, but it began to fade into a dull ache as my body succumbed to exhaustion. The intruder grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me violently, trying to wake me. My vision darkened, and my senses began to slip away. The last thing I heard was his frustrated curses before he fled, leaving me alone in the oppressive darkness. My consciousness ebbed slowly. The pain and fear were replaced by a numb, detached sensation as I lay on the basement floor. The shadows seemed to close in around me, and the darkness grew thicker, enveloping me completely. Despite the intruder's desperate attempts to revive me, I remained oblivious to his presence. The pain had receded into a dull ache, and the world around me faded into nothingness. I was unaware of the police arriving, the rush of activity, or the frantic calls for help. The darkness swallowed me whole, and I drifted further into unconsciousness, unable to respond to anything or anyone. I had been eagerly anticipating a quiet evening alone. Lisa and her family were away for the weekend, leaving me to house-sit their large, charming home. The house, with its cozy corners and welcoming ambience, seemed like the perfect retreat for a solitary night. It was a classic two-story structure with a sprawling living room, a warm fireplace, and a kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of freshly baked cookies from Lisa's last batch. I had settled into the living room with a book, its pages a promise of escape from the everyday hustle. The soft glow of the lamp cast a gentle light around me, wrapping the room in a cocoon of comfort. The ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner was a steady reminder of the peaceful evening I had envisioned. However, that tranquility was abruptly disrupted as the night deepened. Outside, the wind began to howl with increasing intensity, causing the windows to rattle and groan. What had initially been a soothing lullaby became an eerie chorus of foreboding. The gentle rustling of leaves outside, which once seemed calming, now transformed into an ominous roar. The shadows cast by the flickering light seemed to take on a life of their own, morphing into unsettling patterns that danced menacingly on the walls and floor. Each gust of wind made the house creak and settle in a way that seemed almost too deliberate. My sense of security began to erode, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease that I tried desperately to ignore. Determined to dismiss my growing discomfort, I decided to check the security of the house. I went to the front door, checking the lock with a practiced hand. It was secure, as expected. I moved to the windows, ensuring they were all tightly locked. I peered out into the night, seeing nothing but shadows and the swaying trees. With everything appearing in order, I turned off the lights and returned to my book, attempting to focus on the soothing narrative. But the sense of dread was persistent, an unwelcome companion that made every sound in the house seem louder, every shadow darker. The house seemed to come alive with strange noises, each one intensifying my unease. The creak of the old wooden floorboards, the occasional groan of the house settling, and the relentless wind rattling the windows combined to create a disquieting symphony of sounds. Each noise, from the subtle thump of an unseen object to the soft rustle of what seemed like distant footsteps, made me jump. My nerves were frayed, my heart racing as I tried to refocus on my book. The rustling sound, sharp and distinct, scraped against the wall, causing me to snap my head up. My pulse quickened as I scanned the room, searching for the source of the disturbance. The shadows on the walls seemed to shift and elongate, creating sinister shapes that played tricks on my eyes. Despite my attempts to convince myself that everything was fine, the growing sense of discomfort gnawed at me. I decided to check the windows and doors again, more out of a need for reassurance than anything else. Each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet seemed amplified, and every minor sound became a potential threat. Everything appeared secure, but the feeling of being watched persisted, a constant itch at the back of my mind. I paced the rooms with a flashlight, moving through the house with a sense of purpose, but also with a growing sense of dread. The basement door, slightly ajar, loomed ahead of me, its dark presence beckoning with an almost palpable sense of menace. The basement stairs were narrow and steep, a stark contrast to the warmth of the living room. Each step creaked ominously under my weight, amplifying the eerie silence of the house. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves as I descended into the darkness. The air grew colder, and the oppressive feeling intensified with each step. My flashlight cut through the gloom, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The basement was cluttered with old furniture, dusty boxes, and cobwebs, the remnants of forgotten belongings and past lives. The beam of my flashlight illuminated the dusty surfaces, revealing a jumble of items that seemed to mock my growing sense of dread. The rustling noise, which had initially been faint, was now more pronounced, coming from a dark corner filled with old, musty furniture. My heart pounded in my chest as I moved cautiously toward the source of the noise. Every footstep seemed to echo, amplifying the silence that followed each movement. The rustling grew louder, and I felt a shiver of fear as I shone the flashlight into the corner. The beam revealed nothing out of the ordinary, just old boxes and furniture piled haphazardly. The noise had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed almost more frightening than the noise itself. I turned to leave, feeling a growing sense of relief, but then a loud crash echoed through the basement, jolting me upright. The sound of the crash made me jump, and my flashlight flickered, its beam casting erratic shadows across the room. I saw a shadowy figure dart across the basement, its movement quick and furtive. My heart raced, and I scrambled back upstairs, clutching the flashlight and a piece of wood I had grabbed for protection. The house seemed eerily silent now, the wind outside a distant roar compared to the pounding of my heart. Every creak of the floorboards and every rustle in the darkness felt magnified. I moved through the living room, each shadow seeming to press in closer, each sound more menacing. The oppressive atmosphere of the house weighed heavily on my nerves. Back in the living room, I tried to steady my racing heart. I swept the flashlight around the room, its beam revealing nothing out of place. I paced restlessly, my eyes darting around the room, every sound making me flinch. The shadows seemed to grow darker and more oppressive, closing in around me. I dialed 911, my hands trembling as I spoke to the operator. The calm, professional voice on the other end of the line was a small comfort amidst my rising panic. "Hello, there's someone in the house. I think they're trying to break in," I said, my voice trembling. The operator's voice was calm and reassuring. "Can you tell me your address and describe what's happening?" "I'm at 12775 Maple Street. I heard noises and saw someone in the basement. I'm alone here and I'm really scared," I explained, my voice cracking with fear. "Help is on the way," the operator said. "In the meantime, stay on the line with me. Can you tell me more about what you saw?" I described the shadowy figure and the unsettling noises, my fear palpable in every word. The operator's voice was a steady presence, guiding me through the steps to ensure my safety. I continued to check the doors and windows, my flashlight casting jittery beams across the walls. The wait felt interminable, each passing minute adding to my anxiety. The wind outside howled louder, and the house groaned with each gust, creating a disorienting cacophony of sounds. My phone's screen seemed to glow like a beacon in the darkness, a small comfort in the midst of the growing terror. The basement door creaked open slightly, and my blood ran cold as I saw a shadowy figure moving in the darkness below. The rustling and scraping noises resumed, now accompanied by the ominous sound of footsteps. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears as I gripped the flashlight and piece of wood, trying to steady my trembling hands. The figure at the bottom of the stairs was now more distinct, a tall, menacing figure with an angry glare. His eyes gleamed with a malevolent intent, and I could see the glint of a knife in his hand. The sight of him filled me with a surge of primal fear. I knew I had to act quickly. I swung the flashlight and the piece of wood in a desperate attempt to fend him off, but he was fast and agile. The knife slashed through the air, cutting into my arm with a searing pain that made me stagger back. My vision blurred as I struggled to maintain my footing. The intruder advanced with a fluid, menacing grace, the knife gleaming ominously in the dim light as he lunged at me again. I fought back with whatever strength I had left, swinging the piece of wood with a sense of desperation. Each swing seemed to miss its mark, the intruder's movements too quick and too precise. He struck me with the hilt of the knife, the impact sending me crashing to the floor. The pain was intense as the knife sliced into my abdomen, a searing, throbbing agony that made me cry out. My voice was barely more than a whisper, my strength rapidly draining away. The intruder's assault was relentless, his blows and kicks landing with brutal force. I tried to fight back, swinging the wood with what little strength I could muster. The effort was futile, as each swing seemed to fall short. The intruder's attacks grew more ferocious, each hit pushing me closer to the edge of consciousness. The cold, hard floor beneath me felt distant, as if I was sinking into a void. The world around me grew darker and more distant with each passing moment. The pain was overwhelming, but it began to fade into a dull, numbing ache as exhaustion took hold. The intruder grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me violently, trying to rouse me. I could barely respond, my vision darkening. My vision darkened further as the intruder shook me with increasing frustration. The pain in my abdomen was a constant, throbbing reminder of the danger I was in. Each violent shake made the world around me spin, and I struggled to focus on anything but the overwhelming agony. My attempts to fight back grew weaker as the coldness in my limbs spread, my body betraying me with every passing second. The intruder's face loomed over me, his features twisted into a snarl of anger and desperation. I could see the glint of the knife in his hand, its edge reflecting the dim light of the basement. His frustration mounted as my responses grew slower and less coherent. The cold, hard floor beneath me seemed to offer no solace, only the unyielding weight of my own helplessness. The intruder's kicks landed with increasing force, each one driving me further into a haze of pain and confusion. I tried to move, to find some strength to defend myself, but my body refused to cooperate. The darkness around me grew thicker, swallowing me whole. My attempts to cling to consciousness became more futile as the pain receded into a distant, dull throb. The basement, once filled with the oppressive tension of the intruder's presence, now seemed to close in around me. The shadows grew darker, more suffocating, as if they were drawing closer to engulf me. The sounds of the house, the wind howling outside, the occasional creak of the floorboards, became distant and muffled. My body felt heavy and unresponsive, each breath a struggle as I drifted further from reality. The last coherent thought that crossed my mind was the desperate hope that someone would find me. The intruder's frustrated curses echoed in my fading consciousness, a haunting reminder of the terror I had endured. As he continued his efforts to wake me, I remained oblivious, my senses slipping away. The darkness pressed in from all sides, a thick, suffocating presence that overwhelmed me. When I finally regained consciousness, I was in a hospital room, the sterile light harsh against my eyes. The steady beeping of medical equipment was a disorienting contrast to the darkness of the basement. My body felt heavy and unresponsive, every movement an effort. My parents and Lisa were by my side, their faces a mix of relief and concern. My mother's hand was a comforting weight in mine, a small solace amidst the whirlwind of activity. A nurse approached with a soft smile, her voice a gentle reassurance amidst the harsh reality of my situation. "You've been unconscious for a week," she said. "You were found after an intruder attacked you. The doctors managed to stabilize you, and you're recovering." I tried to speak, but could only manage a weak whisper. My mother's tears were a stark reminder of the ordeal we had endured. "You're safe now," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. The comfort of their presence was a stark contrast to the fear and pain I had experienced. The hospital scene was a blur of clinical efficiency, but the presence of my loved ones provided a crucial source of comfort and healing. The ordeal had left me physically and emotionally exhausted, but the support of my family and friends helped me navigate the aftermath of the attack. The memories of that harrowing night remained vivid, but with each passing day, the darkness of that night receded, leaving me with a renewed sense of hope and determination. Thank you for tuning in today for our Home Alone Scary Stories today. If you have any questions, concerns or story ideas that you would like to be narrated on this channel, please contact us at contacthorophiles@yahoo.com. If you enjoyed today's stories, please support our goal of providing horror content for free on YouTube by liking and sharing this video along with subscribing to our channel. This is Horror Files, and we hope to see you tomorrow for more stories.